and welcome to The Process, a podcast about creative people and their creative processes. I'm Kevin Hoogerwerf.
And I'm John Lee.
And today we have our biggest guest ever. If you're here today and you've never listened,
hello, new listeners.
Hello.
Inevitable new listeners.
We're extremely likable. You can subscribe. You can listen. We have so many episodes.
You don't have to listen to them, but I mean...
No, you do. Today we have Edmund McMillen.
Binding of Isaac, Super Meat Boy.
The End is Nigh. A bunch of other stuff.
And we got to talk about The End is Nigh before it was out.
Yeah, before it was announced. Before he had been like teasing this secret project and we got to see it and it was like super dope. And I was like, I'm going to release it like around the time the game comes out, and the game's out. And now I haven't played it yet.
And now here's the episode.
Yeah, now whatever. Here it is, Edmund McMillen. It was really cool.
It was awesome. I regret not using his bathroom.
Yeah,
because I wanted to use his bathroom, but like I felt weird. But then I'm like, I'm sure he's got like a Gengar shaped toilet or something.
Yeah,
he's a huge fan of Pokemon Go.
It was oh yeah, he talks about Pokemon Go being like his favorite game to come out recently, and it was so cool. So he lives in Santa Cruz, which is very, very close to my hometown. I'm from San Jose, and so me and John took a road trip down there, and we got to go to Edmund's house, and it's like.
Thanks to the McMillens for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Because Kevin just like tweeted at him.
Yeah.
And I think he may have agreed to it without knowing that we're a couple of idiots.
Yeah, but it was...
it worked out.
It was awesome. Like, we got to see... his house is like a nerd's dream. Like,
it's so cool.
It's like... It's huge. It's in the mountains. It's like out of the way. And there's just a bunch of nerd stuff everywhere. But in like... a cool looking, like in an adult way. Like I you think of some kid with a bunch of action figures in their room and posters on the wall.
Yeah.
This is like his entire house was the adult version of that.
Everything's like pristine and in good condition. And a little scary, if I'm going to be honest.
And there's Pokemon stuff everywhere.
Yeah, it's the best.
And there's an entire wall devoted to Scrabble, which he was like, that's not my wall. But it was awesome. He was really nice, and like, I don't know. It's funny because like this is probably for a lot of you your first introduction to this podcast. This is our most professional interview.
It is. We're very like NPR, like as if we're on television or something. Just like it's not very bantery or shitheady at all.
Yeah, normally we just joke around and it's very off the cuff. This one we prepared a lot. I was so nervous.
It was very stoic.
Binding of Isaac Rebirth is my favorite game, so it was like, and I got the lore wrong. I asked him a question about the lore, or I like was talking about the lore, and I got it wrong.
Oh my gosh!
I might have cut it out of the episode because it's embarrassing. But if it's in the episode, you heard it here.
Do you address it on the? Or is it just like a mistake?
I say and he's just like, well, he like corrects me very like.
Oh, really?
I'm just like, like Blue Baby is Isaac's soul, and he's like, oh, actually, the lamb is his soul, but I just, oh man, embarrassing, so embarrassing.
What a huge idiot!
Jeez. All right, well,
let's get into it.
Let's get into it because no one's our fans yet, and we gotta like entice them. We're just gonna get into the part they want and talk to Edmund McMillen.
Let's do it.
All right. Season 4. And we joined them in a conversation already in progress. I'm just going to record us. So just say a few things.
Yeah.
Anything you want.
Pokemon Valentine's Day things happening.
Yeah.
You guys checking that out?
Wait, really?
Pokemon Go.
Oh, for Pokemon Go?
Yeah.
I haven't played for a few weeks.
Lickitungs.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Lickitungs for Valentine's Day?
Yeah, and Chanseys.
Pink things, right?
Yeah, pink things.
There's like the pink.
But I didn't have a Lickitung or a Porygon. I mean, that's mostly all her out there. I'm not even really a big Scrabble fan.
And you have a giant Scrabble wall.
It looks fucking
Scrabble
cool.
Wall,
It's really cool.
It's magnetic, a magnetic Scrabble wall.
Yeah, I'm not the best speller in the world. I always have to like
I lose sometimes.
be like, okay, I'm not gonna probably spell this right. Give me some leeway here.
Are you like incredibly competitive, like as someone who designs games, or is it not?
I'm not remotely competitive.
Okay, interesting.
Like it's, I wish I was more competitive, because I have friends who like to win, but it's like, I don't know. I like having fun more than winning.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah.
So tell us about how long you've been in the business.
I don't know when you like count starting, because I've been making independent games for a while, but I didn't even think that there was like it was like a business or anything.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think probably when I started working for Chronic Logic, which made this game called Bridge Builder back in like the early 2000s, late 90s. And around that time I was making websites. I had my own personal website, which I had put like a bunch of like comics. I turned like most of my comics from high school, I turned them into like interactive Flash, not games. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah.
And I was looking for work, and there was just a company down the street that was an independent game studio, which they didn't refer to themselves as independent. No one did. It was just a video game studio down a few blocks from where I lived, and they were looking for an artist to mostly do like in-game art and cover box art.
And then when did you start doing games for Newgrounds? Because that was like where you kind of
Same time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, maybe a year before that. But again, I was just making interactive Flash things.
Yeah, totally.
I had buddied up with Tom, who later went on to make Alien Hominid and Castle Crashers.
Oh, yeah.
And, start the Behemoth. He kind of like took me under his wing, and we started working on a game called Serious P-Shy. That was my like first game that I was working on.
P-Shy?
P-Shy. I never really saw the light of day for because he had to work on this game called Alien Hominid, which I was like, oh, it's going to be a console game. And I'm like, yeah, well, how was that going to happen? But it was like it was like the first independent physical release. Like they released in stores, which was insane.
I remember seeing that. Like it was just surreal because I grew up just playing a ton of Flash games like all the time, and so it was cool to see like that kind of like the box art. And just I don't know. I remember it being a big deal.
Oh, I bought it. I worked at GameStop then, and I got myself a copy, and it was totally surreal to see. But it was kind of like it kind of set that bar for me where it's like, that this is where I can go. Like,
yeah, totally.
Now it's there, and it's like, oh, there's a possibility of me, if I get serious in a company, I can make a game and it can be sold in stores.
Yeah. Well, and Afterbirth Plus is coming out for the Switch, right? In a physical form. That's your first physical release?
First physical release in the US on console.
Okay, cool.
Back in the day, I released most of my games on PC in like random stores like Fry's and stuff like that through like smaller companies. You don't really make any money and no one really sees it. But I mostly did it because I really wanted to see the physical box in the stores. Okay. And I think I even have some pictures of like the first time going over there. And but I mean, that kind of basically set the bar for me as far as like, okay, this is achievable. I need to work towards this. And about the time where Tom was like, sorry, I can't work on this game with you anymore because I got to do Alien Hominid, I'm like, well, I need to find another person that programs because I really want to make a game.
Yeah.
And Chronic Logic, which was like basically Alex Austin, who he was just known for his physics work. I basically was like, okay, I'm going to design a game around this guy's physics engine because this is what he's really good at. And I came up with the concept of Gish, which was my first like sold title. And we worked on that for I think 8 to 9 months before we finally released it. And that kind of opened the doors for everything. Like I didn't know what the Independent Games Festival was. I think it was probably on their third or fourth festival at that point in time. And we entered in that and got into the finals. And then the next year we actually went up against Alien Hominid.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
That's great.
And we beat them. We shouldn't have. They should have won. But
sure.
The way it usually works is like the underdog usually gets
gotcha.
That makes sense.
Right, yeah.
After Gish and winning the IGF, it was kind of like the bar had been raised up there, and I didn't see past that bar. Right. It was like at that point in time, there was no Xbox Live was bubbling, and this was from the original Xbox. And I think there was a game called Wick and the Fable of Souls that came out for it. It was like a bunch of like random kind of obscure games that were for Xbox Live, which I don't think anybody even realized was there.
Right.
Everybody was playing like Halo 1 at that point in time and stuff.
Yeah.
And kind of trying to figure out what's next after this because I'd kind of already achieved that. Like, where do I go from here? What do I do? So I started getting contacted by a bunch of different people, and one of the options was to do Gish on Xbox Live, and that was like the best possible scenario. Because at that point in time, Steam wasn't available. Like there was no Xbox Live anything for anybody else, so no console anything. And most independent games were sold for $20, and if you're lucky, maybe sold 50,000 copies. That's like the best case scenario you could do. I think like in its lifetime, Gish probably made a few $100,000 split between 3 people over 8 years or something.
Oh, wow.
So, and that was considered a huge success back then.
Yeah.
Like that was a big deal. But the Xbox Live stuff was like, oh, here's a huge option. Like here's a way to get your game to a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. And it was like right at that point in time that Chronic Logic broke up.
Oh,
so like all the deals and stuff that we had just kind of went nowhere. There's the two directions, like there's the financial and then there's the creative. And it's like, well, if I'm not gonna, I was still working at GameStop and whatever else.
Right. Uh-huh.
Like if I'm not going to achieve this financial success, because even at that point, even Alien Hominid wasn't like blowing up.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't until Castle Crashers and Xbox Live on 360. That's when it's like boom. Like that was by like 2007, 2008 was when like all the indie games exploded.
Yeah, like that was that around the time like Braid came out? And
yep. Yeah. Braid and World of Goo.
Oh right. Yeah.
Castle Crashers. Those were like the big ones. And I knew all those people and like right. And like it was just so surreal to have this like the options were all there. You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, seeing all these people, all my peers, like all these people that I respected and worked with in many different ways over the years, it was just so crazy to see them blowing up.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
It was just like insane, and all these options that I didn't even realize were there. But yeah, like as that stuff opened, the doors just slammed shut, and it was just like, oh no, the company's breaking up, and we've got to figure out how to get Gish, how to get the IP and all the legal stuff and all the bullshit that went along with that. We formed a new company called Cryptic Sea, tried our best to gather up what we had. Ended up working with Cryptic Sea for a few years, and nothing really happened. We were trying to work on Gish 2. We released a game called Blast Miner, which didn't do well at all. It did come out in stores, but it was just kind of like not well received. Yeah, it was very odd. It was an odd kind of depressing time.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of used that to motivate me. I went backwards. I went back into Flash. I went back online. This was around the time that like you could get your game sponsored. And that was for maybe like a $2,000 or $3,000 back in the day. And it was basically, and you'd advertise for somebody, and that was it. And I started churning out tons of different Flash games. And the cool thing was I got to kind of like branch out a bit as far as like I was used to making similar to what I did with Meat Boy, a game just like something else. It's like like, oh, this is like Mario but my style.
Sure, yeah.
And like in a lot of ways kind of Gish was like Mario but my style also with this guy's physics engine. You know, that was like, and I was trying to branch out and do more weird experimental things. And I got contacted by this kid. He was like 15 at the time. His name was Florian, and he was from Austria, and he could kind of speak English.
Okay, yeah.
And he was a big Gish fan, and he would send me all these prototypes that he would make. He was trying to kind of recreate Gish in Flash, and he was doing things that I'd never seen done before. And he was kind of like he was not at all traditionally trained. He learned himself. He experimented with a lot of different decompiling different things and just kind of rebuilding them. And everything he did was very physicsy. He was very inspired by Alex and his physics engines. And he tossed this thing at me. He would always throw me his prototypes, and one of them was the spider game. It was, you just played as a spider and you can move around his legs. I thought it was really cool. And I was like, well, I have this idea that I want to do. I want to experiment with like moody themes, kind of depressing themes, and see if I could get the player attached to this spider. And because if you physically move them around, you actually have to be delicate with them and whatever else. And that ended up becoming Triachnid. And I think we made that in like maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And that was the first of many different Flash games that I made around that time. And I'm just kind of like slowly building these. I just wanted to do a new IP every single time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to do weird stuff and Coil and a bunch of other odd things and try to like branch out as much as I can. And I was pretty much doing what I had done previously in comics. I had done a bunch of like independent comics and which range from like comics that are loosely based on my personal life to just absurd, obscene, offensive things to more introspective, almost weirdness. What are you doing?
That's okay. You're fine.
Totally
Yeah.
fine.
Like you're gonna edit it and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Or we might keep it in for authenticity.
This will be the only part we keep in. We'll cut everything out.
Because I know if I interrupt him, he totally loses his train of thought. Sorry, do you see me try to walk in very not interesting?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
I don't know if that was more or less.
Yeah, I love that style of like that combination between like gross and adorable almost. Like the
Yeah, I mean, you can get away with so much. You can go so dark if you make things cute. Like,
Yeah. Oh, totally.
right. Yeah,
Like,
it's so true.
it is beautiful.
well,
And,
just playing Isaac, I always forget. Like sometimes I realize like what I'm playing, and like I take a look at it, and I'm just like, oh, this is like grotesque, and I just forget.
no, I mean like that. I mean, in a lot of ways, a lot of my game's themes are kind of me in a very roundabout way, almost getting off on the fact that I'm forcing people to witness and experience these really dark, odd parts of my brain, I guess.
Yeah, well,
and like it's just. I mean, I was always the kid growing up that would find this new weird band that was kind of abrasive and weird, and I'd find some way to like finagle playing it for the class, and it was kind of like, or I don't know if you guys seen the movie Dead Alive. It's called Brain Dead over in the UK, but Peter Jackson movie, super gory, and I was able to like show the class that because I was able to. It was like I think it was probably like 9th, 10th grade, and a substitute teacher came in. I was able to convince this person that we were going to watch this movie, and it was totally fine.
Yeah.
And the whole class watched it, and half the class just walked out and left because they couldn't deal with it. That's definitely the kind of kid I was growing up.
And what do you think like inspired that, or like just those kinds of interests?
I don't know. I think in a lot of like maybe narcissistic ways, I find these things and I think they're so fucking cool, and I don't understand why other people don't like them.
Right.
And I just want to show them because I know that there's a high probability that they might really, really like it. And like, I don't know. I really enjoy the stuff that people don't like to talk about for whatever reason, and it's that stuff that interests me the most. It's like why not?
Right, yeah. Like it's here. Like we might as well explore it.
Like I remember vividly growing up when I was like 4 to like 7. I had this little Fisher Price recorder. It was from the 70s. I think it was like off-colored brown, tan. Pretty awesome, and a bunch of cassette tapes. And I would record myself. I would do like talk shows with a bunch of little bits and stuff in it. They weren't remotely funny at all. I remember finding the tapes and thinking like, I would just like sing chorus lines of songs and then go, "Let's go over here," and then I would like try to interview my sister and just say weird things. But then it would like you get to the end of the tape and then you'd hear me like go, "Fuck," and then like, "Motherfucker."
You're whispering it too. I love that.
And I would like. Because that's what I would do. At night, I was like, okay, well, why can't I say these things?
Yeah, right, yeah.
I want to say them, and I want to hear like what's so crazy about
what's
I'm
all
doing.
the fuss. Yeah,
like what's going on here.
I mean, like as you're like designing the Binding of Isaac, is it as you're doing it, as you're like, oh, I'm just gonna push that envelope, I'm just gonna push it, I'm gonna offend, or is it all just sort of organic?
My goal definitely isn't to offend.
Okay, yeah.
It's very easy to offend people, especially now. It takes no effort at all. Like if I wanted to offend people, I could say a few words and that would be the end.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's and I think a lot of people do, even fans miss that. They'll be like, oh, yeah, you're that kind of guy, and you'd say this and you'd whatever, and it's like, no, you're like there's an art to exploring things that may be offensive to most without kind of like crossing that line into just being obscene for shock value.
It's
never really my goal. Like the the things that people might be offended by or might be grossed out by or might be put off by, I'm not putting those things to put people off. I'm putting those things in because I genuinely am interested in those things.
Yeah.
I'm never going out of my way to just shock value. But not to say that there's anything wrong with that. Like there are times where in the past where I definitely have gone that direction, and it's definitely can be very fun to poke and prod people. And
so when it comes to a character like Super Meat Boy, how did you ultimately land on that name? Were there other names that were like contenders, or was it always
I tend to sketch things out in a bunch of different design books and stuff that I have, different characters that I think are interesting. All my characters usually have like severe flaws, usually severely vulnerable.
Right,
like
fragile.
Very, very, very fragile and just kind of gross, I guess, ugly and weird. Just makes it more, you attach yourself more to something that you need to feel like you need to be gentle with or whatever else. And then there's also like, Meat Boy's a boy without skin, and the idea of like just being skinless and having all your nerves on the outside and and then just running him through salt and saws and at some point in time I had
exposed.
sandpaper stuff on paper. It's just that sort of stuff. Like I like the idea of like the cringy like
And it gives the game stakes, like he has no skin. And then who are the other characters in Meat Boy?
Bane Girl and Dr. Fetus. Yeah,
right.
Those are all designs. Like I had around the time when I did Time Fuck Spewer and Meat Boy all like one right after each other, and those were all kind of characters that I just had on paper that I thought were interesting. And Meat Boy was originally the Meat Ninja. He was basically just looked like Meat Boy with a ninja hood.
Right.
But, excuse me, at that point in time, there was a game called N that had come out. And it was, you played as a ninja.
Oh.
And I was like, I don't want to.
Right.
It's already a platformer. You jump off the wall, so I don't want to, put any more nods to this and be like, people just I didn't
ripped off N.
I rip off a lot of people, but I wasn't trying to. I wasn't trying to rip them off.
Not trying to rip off N.
Try to push it away. The funny thing was, around the same time, I had also people when we started before Super Meat Boy started development and Meat Boy had come out. A lot of people were like, "Oh, you're just ripping off this game called Jumper." And I looked at Jumper. I'm like, "Oh, this looks very similar."
Oh no!
And it's just that same like red cube jumping around and stuff like that. And I thought it would be. That's when I actually got in contact with Matt Thorson. The guy that made Jumper eventually went on to make Towerfall.
Okay. Is that like Towerfall Ascension? Was there?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I love that game.
He's like the king of platformers. That guy's so good. He's working on one now too. I think it's called Celeste. But yeah, I got in contact with him and I was like, hey, just so you know, it's like it's always so awkward, like communicating with somebody else and trying to convince them that you weren't trying to rip them off in any way, shape, or form. It's like the games were very, very different, but the character was still a red cube, and it was a platform.
There is that
game. But yeah, I ended up kind of butting up with him and helping him out with sponsorships and stuff like that, hooking him up with different people, and he ended up making the move from Game Maker to Flash. He made a bunch of games. I think one called Money Seas and Give Up Robot. Those were pretty big back then. And then he did Towerfall and whatever else he's working on now. But I put Jumper, Ogmo's the name of the character. I put him in Super Meat Boy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? That's really cool.
Because so many people were saying, rip off.
Right.
And it's like,
here he is.
Yeah.
Well, and then because a lot, like you said, a lot of your games are just kind of your version on like Super Mario or like Isaac is very Zelda dungeon inspired. So what's that process like of kind of what's your like starting point and where do you go to put your own kind of feel on that game?
With Isaac, it was super specific. It was quite literally like, well, number one, as most people know, I didn't think that Isaac would be a popular game in any way, shape, or form. If I did, I wouldn't have made it in Flash. It was literally my vacation break from Super Meat Boy development. The game had come out, and Tommy had taken a vacation with his then girlfriend to Hawaii, and I don't travel. So it was kind of like, I really want to break too, but I'm going to be like real with myself and be like, what would be the most relaxing thing? I think at first it was like, I'm going to buy a bunch of Legos and just do Legos or whatever. But no, like I want to make a game with no expectations, with no pressure, none.
Right. Yeah.
And
A free rate.
Yeah. And I want to go balls to the wall with it because in a lot of ways, Super Meat Boy was playing it really safe. Like I was strategically choosing the right IP at the right time.
Totally.
Like it was my most accessible design. I knew the characters were well liked from the prototype. I knew that it had legs because the prototype and Flash had been played millions, like maybe like 12 million times by the time like Meat Boy started development. So you know, in platformers, I had made 1 billion platformers before that, so I knew what I was doing, and I'm going to play it safe as possible. And if I'm investing 2 years of my life and all my money into this project, it's hopefully make my money back. But with Isaac, it was like I'm going to do the opposite. I have the freedom now to do whatever I want to do, and I want to do something weird, and I want to do something randomly generated. And at the time, I had been playing a bunch of old traditional roguelikes. The main one is Crawl with the stone. It was called like Crawl Stone Soup. I think the visualizer was called Stone Soup. I'm not 100% sure. But those games were just so good, and it was so weird to me that like nobody was playing them. Like they weren't at all. They're so unknown. There's just this pocket of people who almost like don't want anybody else to have it. It's like, and they were so inaccessible because the visuals were just so like, for the most part, most of those games are just ASCII art, and it was just looked bad. And you had to really have a technical understanding of what was going on to really get it. And around the same time, I think Spelunky, the original Spelunky, had already come out on PC, and love Spelunky. And it was so inspiring to see somebody who obviously played a lot of roguelikes and was going to do an action roguelike. And it was so an action roguelike. And it just, Spelunky to me was that infinite game. It was like bringing back the arcade, you know, making a game that can be played indefinitely and every experience is different. And, you know, the basic elements are always there, but you're always getting lost in this world. Yeah. And I thought, well, I want to do something like that. I'm going to use the skeletal structure of Zelda, which the first Zelda I did play through once a year, every year. It was one of my favorite games. And I really liked just the basic structure of how the game worked dungeon-wise. And I was like, oh, like I could just randomize this. I could totally randomize this basic formula and make it my own, make it completely different than what was going on here. And I was like, well, I was also a big fan of Smash TV and Robotron, and I thought, I'll do like a dual stick shooter random Zelda. Right. And it wasn't originally Isaac. It was just a top-down monster that shot. It was just, you know, bare bones.
He wasn't shooting tears at the time.
No, it was this was of course on paper. I always like prototype on paper first to make sure that what I'm thinking through is going to work, and before I shop it around to anybody. But it was like I just wanted to do Robotron randomly generated, and then I was like, okay, well, what did Miyamoto do when he was making Zelda thematically? And it was like, okay, he made it a game about his childhood, you know, exploring by himself in the forest and whatever else. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do that too. I'm gonna do exactly what he did.
It comes from a genuine place.
And I'm gonna talk about stuff that is honest and stuff that I know about and stuff that I'm interested in. And at the time I'm still very interested in religion in general and Christianity in general. But I had gone pretty deep into like the 80s Christian propaganda. I'm a big fan of Jack Chick, who recently died. He's this like evangelical Fire and Brimstone comic book artist who was made, his claim to fame was he made these little comic books that were really hardcore Christian, anti everything else.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Any other, like, Catholics were the devil. You know,
Football's
gay
the
people
devil.
were the devil. Everything is the devil.
Right, yeah.
D&D is the devil, etc. It's really great though. It's really, really over the top in some pretty amazing ways. And I was into just the 80s was full of a lot of crazy Christians who are trying to scare the hell out of parents.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And
no pun intended.
and it was an inspiring time. I don't know. There's something to being an outcast born in the 80s, surrounded by this Christian Catholic family who constantly looked at you as I was very obviously the black sheep.
Right,
And
yeah.
whenever I went, to the McMillen side of the family, it was so odd. And it was hard for me not to want to play the role that they gave me. Like, they handed me this, like, devil card.
Right, yeah.
And
Play this character.
yeah, and it was like, I'm going to
Right,
play this character. And all the things that they said I could and shouldn't do just made it so much more interesting.
Yep. Yeah.
And I wanted to write about that. I wanted to explore. I wanted to explore the light side, the dark side, and everything in between. The whole process was a total adventure for me. It was a trip down memory lane. And of course, initially going in, it was kind of like, it's probably like the atheist side of me who was just scoffing at everything and being like, these dumb Christians, I'll give them what for.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And that was definitely part of it. But then as I navigated through these memories and through these themes, and they came through the game, I just realized more and more how completely inspiring, like, growing up, especially Catholic, was for me as a creative kid, because it's incredibly creative. The rituals are nuts, and like
just the imagery and like all the
It's very my cup of tea. Like, it's super gory, it's super dark, and then when you kind of like jump into the opposite side of it, and the whole idea of like a lot of anti-Christians, which I guess would be considered Satanists by Christians, all they did was reverse their rituals.
Yeah.
And like as a protest, right? And then, of course, if you believe the stuff in the Bible, it's really easy to believe the opposite. You believe that there's the duality there. If we are the light, then there is the dark. And if God has all these powers and Jesus did all these things, then why isn't there, nega Jesus doing evil stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Those things have to coexist. And it's just interesting. It's just super, super interesting.
Right.
And with Isaac, I got to explore all those things, and I got to explore the darkness in a very lighthearted, jokey way.
Right.
That somehow I was able to get away with. And once I had the basic prototype on paper, I contacted Florian, who at the time I didn't realize that he was broke, like totally broke. He didn't talk to me about any financial stuff.
Yeah.
And, until the very end, he was like, "I don't have any money. Do you know when we're going to release this?"
It's like, oh.
But yeah, it was a 3-month project.
Okay.
And it started out, I was going to just work on it for 2 weeks. And of course I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. I feel like if I add more, you get that sweet spot. It's going to get there. Worked on it for another month, and it was kind of like, well, this is probably good enough to get sponsored by Adult Swim. I heard that they paid, upwards of $10,000 to $40,000 for an IP. And I was totally willing to sell it.
Right.
And, or it was around that time, I think I started shopping it around to, I think I showed it to John Blow and Adam Saltzman, a bunch of different developers. And I was like, what should I do with this? And they're like, put it on Steam. And it's like, but it's Flash. I don't even know if they would be okay with that.
Yeah,
like,
right.
It's going to run like crap. And I had a few people like pushing me towards like different wrappers that I could use for it so it could run a little better, and ways to like help the performance and stuff like that. And I was really nervous because this was around the time that Greenlight was starting.
Right.
And I was like, how do I go about asking my Steam contact if I can put this shitty game up on Steam? And it was just like, ugh, I was just so nervous. And I was like, it would just be really cool and really helpful, of course, to Florian as well to be able to make some money off this. And I feel like it could make more than a basic sponsorship, and I don't have to sell the IP. And I was like, okay, here. And they're like, sure.
Just no problem.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It's like I had made a very successful game for them,
Right.
and they were fine with whatever else I was going to do. This was, if Isaac was a piece of shit and didn't sell at all, that would probably be it. They'd probably not respond to my emails after that. Whatever
No
else.
more.
It's like, I get my one hit with Meat Boy, and that was it. But it initially came out, and I thought this is cool. Like it did better than I expected, but it didn't blow up for another 6 to 8 months.
Oh, really?
It was like the summer of the next year is when.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was when it went.
Why do you think that is? I mean, all of a sudden.
I think it had a lot to do with Isaac and Let's Players. The boom of Let's Players was that year, and there were just a lot of people playing Isaac because it's the game that you could kind of like stem out on. Like it's kind of like Tetris or whatever. You're just like not paying much attention. You can talk.
Right,
be funny.
yeah.
There's a lot of like, this is weird. Oh, what's this? Like it's really easy to do commentary over the kind of themes and stuff that were in Isaac.
And it's very watchable too, because it's like you get these one-off synergies between some items, and so it's like you're never going to be able to experience them all. So like you can watch them, and it's just like a very entertaining game to watch.
Yeah, there's so many creatures in this game. Is it all you? Like this? No one else is like helping you design these creatures. Like there's just so many.
Some of the new stuff. I'd say about like 10 or 15 of the new enemies, and maybe a handful of some of the bosses were basically designed by a few of the other people in the team.
Okay.
And suggested, hey, like what about this? What about this?
Right.
How have you reacted to like people's different interpretations of the game?
The
like,
fan theories.
Because there's so much. Like
There's some crazy ones. Sometimes I feel guilty because I feel like I put stuff out there. Like the main misdirection that I felt guilty about was the fact that Brother Bobby and Sister Maggie were the first two familiars that were made in the game. And the theme I was playing off of is in the 80s, a lot of people who eventually they turned out to have schizophrenia and stuff told a lot of stories about how that they were ritually abused and they were forced to constantly get impregnated and have abortions. So there's this abortion theme. And I play around with the idea that Isaac might have had brothers and sisters.
okay.
Not necessarily that it's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
Right.
The fact that there's a sister Maggie there, and that one of the other characters is called Maggie. And then there is a lot of imagery of Isaac dressing up like a girl.
Yeah.
Right.
So people instantly gravitated towards this is all about him dealing with the death of his sister.
Okay.
But Isaac never had a sister.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just Isaac.
Right.
So I felt bad about that. But I always felt like the story was pretty direct and straightforward. And I feel like I'm pretty clear with it.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
I think maybe the main issue with a lot of the game's themes is that it goes in a lot of different complicated directions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things like at this point in time, people should realize that the story that they're told in the beginning is drawn on paper by Isaac.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Not necessarily reality at all.
Totally. Yeah.
It is a fictional story that Isaac is telling you on paper. The game that you play at this point in time should be obvious that Isaac is dying in the chest, and as you progress through the game, it's just this amalgamation of all of his fears and all of his worries culminating into this final end, like the end. And it's basically his last dying, like delirium is the light at the end of the tunnel, sort of flashing through your life, sort of situation.
Cool.
So how did you partner up with Nicholas and like put out Rebirth? Like how did that whole process take place?
So Tyrone had been haunting me for years. Like he was always around. I'd always see him at GDC, and I just knew him as the guy who loved Cave Story and ported it a million times.
Yeah.
And I love Cave Story. That game's great. Totally understandable. And he would always be like, "Hey," no, he'd always talk to me about putting Super Meat Boy or Time Fuck. He really likes Time Fuck. All my old games, he's like, "We should port them. We should port them to 3DS." And it's like, I don't know. I just don't think that'd be a good financial move.
Yeah.
And at that point, at the point of like Isaac, and I think after I did Wrath of the Lamb expansion, and I realized that like the game is broken.
Right.
It can't be fixed, and we can't do any more expansions. And there's so much more that I want to do. And a lot of the driving force for me was not really watching Let's Players, but it was watching my wife play.
Okay.
And she like obsessively played. Like she likes video games, obviously. We play a lot of video games together. She plays a range of games, but I've never seen her get that into a game before. And it didn't matter at all that I made it. It didn't matter. It was literally, it was like,
is it good or
she
not?
really, and she plays it every day now.
Oh,
like
wow.
there's not a day that goes by. Like she plays it every day. And whenever I do a new expansion, she just gets sucked right back in and starts a whole new save. Like
that's great.
Like she played when Afterbirth came out on PlayStation, she started playing through that, and then Afterbirth Plus came out on PC, and she just like said, "Fuck the PlayStation, I'm gonna start a whole new save on Steam again." She's the queen of erasing her save when she gets to a point and wants to just go through it all over again. But I really wanted to do more. And it was very inspiring to see her so into something that I had done. I was like, well, okay, what are my options? And at the time I was working on eugenics, which I ended up hitting a wall with. But it was just a whole other project that it was very Isaac-y, where it was like, I want to do something ballsy and weird, maybe not much of a game. I don't know, something weird.
Right.
And I thought, well, maybe it is the time to give Tyrone the reins and let him do this port that he wants to do. And I'll work on my own projects, and then he can just do the port. And that's what it was. It was just going to be a port, just a straight port of the Flash game. And I started to just feel guilty that it was like, well, I don't want people to just rebuy the game. Like I got to do something. And it just ballooned and ballooned. I feel bad, but I mean, obviously in the end it was worth it, but I pushed that game back a year in development because it was just like, well, it's not good enough. It's not enough. More. And it got it perfect though. I mean, it became the game that I really set out to make. Yeah. And it ran so well, and there were just so many improvements. I was so happy with it. And it was nice to be able to look at, a lot of people didn't like the pixel art. I liked the pixel art. Originally it was going to be an 8-bit game. I was just going to do basic sprites, but I didn't like how the animation looked, and I thought, oh fuck it, I can draw really, really fast. And if you go back and look at the art in the first game, it's really, really rough. Like I don't even close a lot of the circles. Like it's just like, oh, there's a gap there, whatever. Yeah. Like even Isaac's head, like the shape of his head is just so
just the stuff that everyone's gonna see.
Well, that's all I saw. That's all I saw is that it looked like mud. It's like, how many shades of brown am I going to put in this game? And it looked very flat. There is no perspective. It's funny to me how willing people are to accept these shortcomings of something that they love because they experienced it. And it's like, no, come on. I don't think anybody at this point is going to argue that the original looked anywhere near currently. Like it looks great. And it was nice to see those improvements. It's like, I had never worked with another artist before. That was weird. Directing people was so super alien to me. I got told a few times by Tyrone, where he's like, it would be nice if you said something nice.
Some affirmation would be good.
I was like, I've worked with programmers for a long time, and most programmers that I work with are just very formulaic. They don't give a fuck. Like if if I told Florian, hey, what you're doing isn't good, do it differently. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like whatever. He understands.
Yeah.
And that's how it was with every programmer that I worked with. It was like they know what they're doing, and you can talk to them very matter of fact. And maybe I just got.
If you said something nice.
I think I just got used to, talking not very humanly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
Not very compassionately or caring. Sounds horrible, but.
How heavily were you involved with? I mean, I imagine pretty heavily, but like, what was your role when they started the port?
The term port for our process listeners.
Oh,
and John.
And John.
A remake.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. I figured, but
a remake for consoles. I mean, originally it wasn't going to come out on Steam. It was just going to be consoles. My involvement was daily builds, testing, and email tweaks constantly. Like I would just send they'd send me a build and I'd literally send them a ridiculous like hundreds of notes.
right.
Like
that's so good.
The hardest initially was just getting Isaac to look like how I wanted him to look.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was just a lot of back and forth where it's like move the eye down 1 pixel and out to the side. And even still to this day, it was like doing the cover box for Switch. Tyrone had 2 different artists on it, and I'm very particular with how Isaac looks. Like, there's certain things that are because it's really easy for Isaac to look like an alien.
Yeah.
Because his
Right,
eyes
yeah,
are so
yeah.
big.
Yeah.
And like you've got to put the eyes very specifically, and you got to bump the mouth up kind of between the eyes very specifically, like because it can't look ugly. And if the mouth is too low, it doesn't look as cute.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if the eyes aren't big enough, it doesn't look as cute. And then you get into this alien bug boy territory.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can be pretty anal and controlling, and I'm sure the initial development phase I probably wasn't super well liked, but it was a learning experience for sure.
Sure.
I mean, I've gotten used to it now, and honestly, a lot of it was very hard for me to deal with because I was so used to overworking myself and doing everything.
Yeah.
That I sometimes felt guilty for having other people. Like I could just do it myself. Like, why don't I just do this myself? But I'm also really good at spreading myself thin and overworking myself. And so in the end, it was great. It was a great experience. It was very easy. They made it super easy.
Hello, I'm Lee Cox.
Yeah, I'm Alex McKay.
And we are Red Hot Thunder Club. And we have a podcast.
We've both been guests on the process before. You might have heard it.
I'm very depressed.
And I used to do heroin.
And we have a podcast together.
I started this club when I was a little boy before podcasts, and I haven't matured since.
Yep, so now we record just our meetings of the Red Hot Thunder Club.
We're 2 gross boys trying to make some gross money in a gross world.
We got songs.
Little dog puking up snot just like his dad. Me. Little dog.
We got product ideas.
So I came up with the slap-on, strap-on.
We somehow make money off of fetishes.
Vagina dentata with braces.
But more than anything, we've got...
Spunk.
Yeah.
Boom shakalaka and we like a good van. Boom Ricky licky licky boom Sally Jesse boom Jenny boy.
So listen and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
To step out of your comfort zone and into the comfort zone.
Gross.
How has the community impacted Isaac's development, and like not even just Isaac, but just like as a developer, how has like the community's response to your games affected how you develop them?
Or do they?
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Oh, they do.
Okay.
It's a weird situation. It doesn't affect me much anymore, and I expect a lot of backlash with anything I do.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to a significant. Like I didn't know that the Afterbirth Plus launch was going to have as many issues, balancing issues.
Yeah.
Because we actually had more testers on it than usual, and that's a whole thing in itself. But I knew that people were going to have problems, and they were going to hate me and blame me for everything. Their whole life was over, etc. But I also knew that you give it a month, and no one will care.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
That's a really weird thing because people are so passionate, and it's like You know, I try to be as understanding as possible. I realize that to a lot of people, this game is really important. Way more important to them than it is to me at this point in time. And it's probably way more theirs than it is mine at this point in time. And that's kind of like where I'm at. Like, there are so many things that I would like to improve about that game that can't be improved unless I made a whole new game.
Yeah,
You know, like there's no way to expand and fix stuff. And people are very vocal.
Right. Yeah.
And I definitely don't let it get to me, but there are times where in order to continue to not let it get to me, that I have to just kind of not look.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's hard to cut out that noise.
Yeah,
Like,
it's like there in the past I'm a pretty direct person, and if somebody, you know, calls me out on something, that I'll give them an honest answer. And if someone's a dick, I'll say, you know, you're being a fucking dick. Like you know, you're an ass. But and sometimes it needs to be said.
Yeah, oh, totally.
But the Isaac community has been a very interesting one, and it's been a learning experience the whole way through. I hopefully won't make another game that will be this popular,
right.
that people cared this much and are looking with the mag. There's so many.
Yeah.
The worst
They
is like
scrutinize,
there's so many other developers that are super fans.
Yeah.
And there are especially ones that are programmers that can actually like look and see like, oh, I think that they're doing this wrong. They're doing this wrong. And it's like, I wouldn't even know. I don't program. I'm just giving people basic direction and they're going with it. But yeah, I mean, that's why Afterbirth Plus came out. I wanted to be able to be like, okay, you guys at this point are way more into this than I am. Maybe you can do something cool. Go with it.
Right, absolutely.
And they are. And like is the more we support the tools, which we continue to do, the more options they have and the more crazy shit that they do. And we're currently finishing up the first booster pack, which is like 10 items and a bunch of other cool edits. People have some really cool ideas that are overlooked that that I can, you know, be big enough to say, oh, I made a mistake. I made a mistake in that design. There are certain things that are like one of the biggest, the first one to come out that people were really into is the item description mod, which actually, when you walk into a room with an item, text pops up and says, this is what the item does.
Right.
And that in itself was such a weird thing for me, because initially when the game had 100 items, I thought I can just make them all mysterious and people will figure them out.
Right.
But now there's 500 and something items, like 510 items, and like it's not fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
It's just
And it's
overwhelming.
like, I don't know. The best way to probably do it would be to, once you pick the item up once and it's in your collection, then if you run into it again, it'll actually give you some information on what the item does.
Okay.
It's not realistic to do that at this point in
right.
time.
Right. Yeah.
It's one of those things that's like, oh, if we were making a whole new game, that's what I would do. In Bumbo, for example, Bumbo riffs a lot on Isaac, and we put item descriptions. It says somebody will tell you what these things do. It's like the formula is also a puzzle formula, so you don't want to fuck around with somebody. It's not like when you're playing a game of chess and somebody's learning and they're like, okay, the pawn can move one space, except the first time it can move, 2 spaces.
Yeah.
And then nobody tells you that it can move 2 spaces. So you're just always moving the pawn 1 space. And that's not fair.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
It's just, yeah.
because John hadn't played Binding of Isaac much until really recently, and I realized like since I've been playing for a while and like getting the expansions, like I can accumulate knowledge of like these items, and like so every expansion has been pretty easy, and then I realized like, oh no, like I'm just giving him this like infinite,
just throwing him to the wolves.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
No, yeah, and I see that happening a lot too. And there's a lot of flaws in the game that the community overlooks because they're so deep into it, and it's just, yeah. I mean, to me, I all I see is a bunch of design flaws that I wish I could fix and improve, but I can't realistically at this point. But nobody else is pointing those things out.
Yeah.
People love to point at, like, nitpick a specific item and say it sucks, and it's like, what about these
this thing?
glaring flaws in the game's like the game's core formula here? Like,
That's funny.
you've got 5. How are you going to memorize these items? Like, I can't even memorize the goddamn items. But like, one of the other mods that came out was the dice mod, and it was like, the dice rooms, for whatever reason, I cannot for the life of me remember what the dice rooms do.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't know why. It's like, there's only 6. It should be
so
easy.
funny.
And
Yeah,
it's like,
that is weirdly like one of the hardest like things to remember. I don't
so
know.
somebody made a mod that just literally, there's text that says, this is what these do. And I was trying to persuade the person to do like, well, it'd be more thematic if it was something more cryptic involved. And in the end, I just said, you know what? We'll give this guy some credit, and I'll just redo that.
Yeah,
and
right.
Currently, what I have that'll be in the booster pack is I actually have an icon that represents, because each of the dice rooms are referencing a dice in itself ability or a forget-me-now pill. I just literally just have those images carved into the dice.
Oh,
stone.
okay, gotcha.
That's easy. That's like, why didn't I think of that? But it took somebody else referencing it, making a mod in a very crude way for me to be like, oh, like, it's already unreasonable that I'm asking so many people to pretty much memorize 500 things. But even more so, these dice rooms is stupid. Like, there's no reason for you not to know, or at least have some idea.
Yeah, like some clue.
Some clue. what's
Sure,
going
sure.
on. Originally, the first 100 items, they didn't say shit when you picked them up. It said the name.
Right.
There was no hint
Yeah,
at
nothing.
anything. And that was the one thing I did with Rebirth. I was like, okay, we're gonna do hint text, and it's not gonna just say flavor text. It's gonna say, speed up, or this is what your tiers do.
Right.
It's gonna give you some push in the right direction when you pick it up, but it still doesn't fix the whole. But how do you know if that's gonna fuck you over
Yeah,
until
yeah.
you pick it up?
Until you do it, yeah.
like this.
But that's part of it, though.
Like Stun's cap looks nice. Like I want that.
But you need those items.
Oh,
You
absolutely.
Definitely need those items. I mean, that's my favorite Let's Plays. There are a lot of Let's Players out there who are all about, like, I just want to have my OP run and I want to look good. But the most enjoyable Let's Plays are the ones that shit goes wrong, or they just barely win. Like, it's just
Right.
Yeah.
like the really
It's
intense
an earned
ones.
win, yeah.
But really fast before we get into the question,
Okay.
I know you want to ask.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a little bit about Legend of Bumbo, because is that your next like big major release? Or?
Yeah. I'm working on 3 projects currently. Bumbo is one of the announced ones that will probably be out by the end of the year.
Okay.
I'm pretty friggin' happy with it. It's my first 3D game.
Oh,
even
cool.
though it's
Wow.
2D cardboard, but it's still in the 3D world.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
It's my second puzzle game, but really my first, real puzzle game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like I guess you could say it's a mashup of like kind of like Puzzle Questy meets Isaac.
Okay.
With it's definitely like a puzzle strategy game.
Okay. Cool.
With the Isaac formula of like semi randomly generated spells and trinkets and whatever else that kind of modify your character in the way that you interact with the puzzle and interact with the enemies.
Cool.
But it's like basically a prequel to Isaac.
Wow.
It's interesting. The themes are pretty cool. So I just started working with Tyler on a secret, no one knows about it, total secret project. It's a platformer. It's kind of like an adventure, semi-open worldy, I don't know, kind of like V.
Okay. Yeah.
And started out super small as almost a mod to Ouroboros, which is the other game that I had announced. And hopefully that'll be out. I hope.
Should I edit this out if it's
Maybe edit this out. I'll show you guys the platform.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
edit it out of this.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it'll come out in April.
Okay.
It's really close to being done, and I'm super happy with it.
Awesome,
Like
yeah.
it's become bigger than Meat Boy, like
Wow.
as far as like its size goes, and I'm playing around with a lot of really interesting mechanics and themes. There's an overarching theme of pressure and doom. Impending doom.
I love that.
And it just gets more stressful as it goes. It's really great. It's soul crushing.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, like just like shifting gears a little bit into Act 2. Where are you born? Where did you grow up?
I grew up here. I grew up in Santa Cruz for the most part. Half in Watsonville. So my grandma lived in Watsonville, which is 20 minutes south of Santa Cruz, like farmland stuff. And then half here.
Do you have any siblings?
I have a sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
She's younger.
we already like went over like a little bit of your childhood. You said like you felt like the black sheep. Was that pretty early? Like were you pretty young, or like was that more high school days?
No, always.
Yeah. Always. Yeah.
Always. Yeah, no, I always felt like an alien. I'm nothing like my dad. I'm nothing like my mom. Nothing at all. Like, vastly different.
What about like in your group of friends? I mean, like, were you...
My group of friends, like friends growing up and
Right,
stuff?
yeah.
I always had one best friend growing up and then
Sure,
people
yeah.
I associated with. And I was associated with the weirdos.
Right, yeah.
Gotcha.
Were you pretty shy in like middle school, high school days?
I don't... No, I wasn't shy.
Okay.
The opposite. I was kind of the class clown.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. But I got in trouble a lot.
All right.
I was always in the office.
Okay.
Yeah, I hated going to school, and I had a lot of stomach problems. So I was like trying to find ways to go home and lie to get home, and then half the time I'm also in horrible pain and I really need to go home.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But yeah, I guess I mean, like growing up, I didn't realize how other people viewed me until much later, and a mentor of mine, like in high school freshman year, I met this guy named Clay Butler who was a comic artist locally, and I was so in awe. He had one of his animations was in the Sick and Twisted Festival of Animation, which was like the coolest thing in the world to me. Like I'm meeting this guy who has, and he's making it seem like that's something that I can do. So cool. He had multiple TV shows on public access, which I was also all about. I ended up being one of his cameramen for a good year down there. But I didn't find out till recently. I ran into him recently, and he was like, I was thinking back about when I met you, and he's like, I don't think you even know this, but they told me to talk to you because they said you were a troubled youth. I was at risk. And I was like, really? And yeah, and he's like, yeah, that was why I talked to you.
Right.
Like, is because the teachers there said that I was at risk.
Yeah.
And I needed somebody to align with in some way, and I guess they picked the right person for sure.
Yeah, they did a good job. Would you say like you grew up like in a pretty strict household?
No. It'd be interesting to have my mom on something like this to ask her opinions.
Yeah. Well, I guess Edmund's mom.
I think that my parents both knew growing up that I was weird, and whatever I was going to do wasn't going to be traditional.
Sure.
They knew that I wanted to do something in art, but who knows what.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were supportive. Everybody was supportive around me. No one discouraged what I was doing, but it was kind of just like, oh yeah, he's weird.
Right. Yeah.
I was a weird kid, and kept to myself for the most part. But yeah, I don't know. It's my childhood memories were lonely, but not in necessarily a negative way. I like being alone.
Right. Yeah.
It was fun. I had a lot of fun adventures by myself.
Totally.
I'm definitely not going to complain about that. I could have made more friends and hung out with my friends more.
Sure. Yeah.
I just didn't want to.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It was like, I don't know, but yeah, I spent most of my childhood alone. Like my mom was for the most part a single parent. After my parents divorced when I was 5.
Okay.
And then I would see my dad every other weekend, which was always really horrible because it was boring, and all he did was complain about how much money my mom's taking from him.
Sure.
So on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he got really religious too once he got off drugs, and he was in recovery, and the whole family's in recovery. So it's nice. I mean, I prefer a religious dad to an absent drug addict dad.
Right.
It's of course way better, but in a lot of ways, I think that addictive personality was the drugs were replaced with God. Like that's all he did. Like AA and NA and Jesus was all he ever spoke of, and all he ever did.
Were you like dragged to church every week, or like would the whole family go and then you would just stay behind?
I went through 7 years of catechism.
Okay.
So, and I did have a few like Catholic summer schools that I went to growing up. I hated it. I got to the point of getting confirmed, and then I told my mom that I didn't feel right about doing it because I didn't really believe in what was going on, and it seemed disrespectful. We had this talk in the drive-thru of Burger King.
All right, it's a great place to have it.
Yeah, it's like a spiritual
I remember
place.
it really, really, really well. Weird.
Do you want to ask the question?
Oh, sure.
The one question we always ask.
The big question. So have you dealt with depression and or anxiety, and how has that affected you creatively?
I feel like all I do is deal with anxiety. I'd say a good chunk of my life is anxiety. Yes. It's definitely in my genes. My grandfather was institutionalized for depression back when they did shock therapy.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My mom has stories of him just not being around and then getting notes from him and stuff like that. And yeah, I didn't find out that stuff until I hit maybe 15, which was the first time that I, withdrew and I had a breakdown. I just like obsessively would watch really sad movies. I worked at Blockbuster and I would rent movies, and there was a period of time where I think it was a week. There was a week where I didn't speak to anybody, and I would just work. I would go to work. I'd come back home. I'd watch Awakenings. I don't know if you guys have seen it's a fucking stupid drama movie about these people that are all in a coma and they all wake up. And Robert De Niro's in it.
Right.
And Robert De Niro reminded me of my stepdad. And I don't know, it was just, I'd watch it and I'd cry. And I just lost it. I don't know. I just detached from everything. And I think I finally had to tell my mom, like, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
And that's when she revealed to me, hey, we're all depressed in this family. And we
were waiting to tell you.
Yeah, and I was just like, there was a lot of moments like that with my mom where it's like some bad shit goes down and she's like, oh yeah, I went through that.
Was that comforting at all, or was that?
Yeah, my mom was very good at that. She's very good at if somebody is in need, she's very good at catering to their needs and comforting them. And took me to the doctor, and got to talk to the doctor, and just basically I didn't realize that when I was young, I was always dealing with anxiety. I was always worried about bad things happening. And I don't know if it's like obsessive compulsive. It's just one of those things where things have to be a certain way or I feel like something bad's going to happen.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
And with me growing up, it was, it caused ulcers. I would get really bad ulcers when I was like 5 years old. Really young. And just worried about people dying. And shit got crazy. And growing up, it just turned into different stomach ailments.
Sure.
Stomach pain. And I was just, I think through like 3rd through 5th grade was when it was like the worst. And I just remember always being in the bathroom, which is constantly referenced in Isaac and like the dream sequences and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Like most of my memories is looking at repeating tile on the ground and counting them between stabbing pains. And like just guzzling different stomach medicines.
Right.
It's like stop stomach acid and all that stuff. That's basically, that was my life growing up. It went away around puberty and then came back at like 15, 16.
Gotcha.
Right.
And it just morphed. It just, no more stomach problems. Now I just am super anxious and I can't leave the house. And that's kind of like been following me around for a while.
Right. Yeah, but we really do see that in Isaac. Is that like you were saying that like all the creatures are like just Isaac's fears and anxiety I guess is the character based off of yourself?
Yeah. I mean, it is, and it's based off of a few different people in my family, but mostly, of course, me. But yeah, I mean, I think I have a hard time not writing about myself in a lot of my work, and the main characters in my games tend to be their own worst enemy, and that's how it always felt.
Right, yeah.
I think anybody dealing with anxiety and depression knows that. Like that feeling of like, you are your own worst enemy. I am the one that will sabotage myself. I am the only thing stopping me from getting to where I want.
Oh, and that's why there's like kind of this triumph, I think, in like Binding of Isaac, where you can still win. Like you can still get to the end of the game. I don't know. Like, has that been like cathartic to kind of get those ideas out in your games?
It's cathartic to work.
Okay.
It's cathartic to, like, it really feels like going to a therapist. Like it feels like when I'm writing and I'm putting all these different themes in my game, most of the time I'm doing it very subconsciously. Something just feels right.
Yeah.
Like a really good example is back in the day when I was doing Serious P-Shy and stuff like that, I had a series of games called The Badlands, and there were all these really weird fleshy creatures, which is a theme in my games. And I always was really into things that were stitched up, scarred, and fleshy or whatever else. And I didn't realize where that all came from until much later, and I realized that it was all from my grandpa. And growing up with my grandpa, he had open heart surgery when he was pretty young, and I would always ask to see his scars. He had gnarly scars, like a huge scar that went all the way down his chest to his belly. And then he had these things that I called his eyes. He had these two oval cut things under like his nipple areas. I just thought it was fucking cool. Right. And he had skin tags all around his neck. I remember always riding on his shoulder and playing with his skin tags. And like, I don't know, my grandpa was huge.
Right. Yeah.
And he was a monster man. And I thought that was the coolest shit ever. He was like Frankenstein. Yeah. And so much of that made such an impact on me that it just bleeds out of me when I sit down. That's like, I'm not like we talked before. I'm like, I'm not trying to be gross when I'm creating these things. I think that looks cool. Yeah, it's just genuine. Like, and in a lot of ways, sometimes years will pass and I'll realize, oh, that's what I was writing about. Like, that makes sense. And all these little pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And I'm like, I'm turning 37 next month, and I'm constantly learning things about myself. It's pretty astounding. You find the reasons why all these things happen.
That's cool. Yeah, it's I've been thinking about this recently. Like when it comes to anxiety, there's sort of like this sort of vicious cycle. I think when you experience anxiety and depression, and then you start to create, and you find yourself in this happy place, and then you put it out there, and then it kind of starts over again. Can you relate to that? This sort of it's just like it's constantly going. Like
no. Me and my wife talk about it that I'm like a shark. I have to keep swimming or I die. And like, it's the truth. Like I've been going through a lot right now because I have a kid now. Yeah. And a lot of that brings me back to when I was little. So there's a lot of like crazy memories that are coming up. But then the other is like, I'm starting to realize now the reality of my priorities and how much more I get from staying with my family and doing fun things with my daughter. Right. It's just better than everything. Oh, totally. And I would really, in a lot of ways, like to just quit what I'm doing. And I can. I can do that. I have the ability to do that. But it would make me a horrible person. It's like I am an awful person to be around. Like I'm a self-destructive, awful human being when I'm not being creative. And my wife knows this. And I'm trying to find the balance. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, and it's such a struggle. Like, it's a whole new world, and I love every minute of it. I'm definitely like happy that we waited as long as we did to have a kid, and I'm happy that we waited for us to be this financially stable and have this kind of schedule. But it's very difficult for me to get used to because I'm so used to being a workaholic.
Yeah. Completing a project, it's like finishing a TV show. Like you feel the sense of like accomplishment, but also like impending doom, like simultaneously. Like,
it's that feeling of like getting in a relationship with somebody and it's so great, and then it's over. And then it's done. Like there's no joy in launching a video game. It fucking sucks.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
the joy is in creating it. Like, which is why I see a lot of projects go on forever. I can totally understand that, especially getting cold feet about releasing something and having it done. Which is the nice thing about Isaac, because it's never done.
Yeah, it just keeps going.
Like that is the beauty of that design, where I never really experienced the launch depression, because the moment that shit came out, I was writing down new ideas.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
totally.
And still to this day, like I do posts and say I'm done. This is the end of the game, and then like somebody will post some mod online, and it'll be like, somebody posted this mod, and it was super basic. It's like these 3 balls, and you use them; they're usable items, and it just kills all the bullets on the screen, and you can use it 3 times. And then it recharges itself at the end of the level. And it was just like, why didn't I ever make something that recharges at the end of the level?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that like opens up so many doors.
Why didn't I ever make something that could be used a certain number of times and then wasn't, refilled for a while? Hey, it's like, that's a whole new world.
Yeah. Or have you ever experienced like pressure when you release a game and it's well received, like the follow-up? How has that affected you?
It never affects me. I don't fucking care. I really don't. I could really give a good goddamn what anybody else thinks. Like, I'm being 100% genuine.
Right.
You're just making what you want to make.
There is absolutely nobody in the world that exists that is more critical of what I'm doing than myself.
Gotcha.
Right.
You cannot match me. Trust me. I am by far my harshest critic, and I can be pretty hard on myself. But yeah, like no, not at all. Like the only thing that sucks for me is knowing that like I want to push myself further. I want to do more risky projects. I'm in kind of this comfortable area with Isaac and stuff. Like I'd really like to go back and finish Mugenics. A bunch of other really weird projects that I started working on that I'm just now able to work on again for a bunch of different reasons. I'd like to take those big risks mostly to show people how much I don't care. Like I want to do crazy weird shit and not care about the financial ramifications or what, people are going to say. Like the stuff that I'm working on right now, I mean, it'll probably be very easily compared to other games. Like Bumbo is going to be easily compared to Isaac, and then people are going to say it's not as good as Isaac. What will I ever make something as good as Isaac? Probably not. Like it's whatever. I'd like to try to get there, but I also try my best to make stuff as different as possible. So there's not a direct comparison, but when it happens, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
I don't. Yeah, I guess it's one of my better qualities, I guess. My ability to really not care and not feel pressure.
Right.
What are you playing right now? Do you like? And how do you have time to play games? Like when
I'm playing Resident Evil right now.
Okay,
which is pretty cool. The themes are great, but I've gotten to that point in the game where it's just become Resident Evil.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's just like, oh yeah, this again. We're doing this again. Which sucks because Resident Evil 4 was so fucking good and had so many really great, amazing design choices. And it sucks that like they didn't re-explore those things again, and they went with the more. There's a lot of cool things about it. A lot of those cool things are really odd design choices. Like, I don't know if you guys have played through it at all, but there's a part in the beginning. The beginning was pretty tough, and I kept dying at certain points because I didn't really get the rhythm of the game yet. And in doing so, I experienced multiple branching paths of little things. So, like the main dude that's following you around and fucking with you.
Yeah.
He locks you in the garage, and you've got to fight him, and you got to figure out how to fight him. And one of the options is you can get in the car and run him over.
Oh, cool.
And didn't realize that was something you could do until he got into the car and ran me over. And I didn't even know, like, that was one of the coolest things in that game that I experienced so far. And I would never have seen it if I would have gotten in that car.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, I'm sure there's a ton. Oh, there was also the part where I got killed a second time where I'm trying to get down to this trap door and he's chasing you around and he grabs me by the foot and cuts it off. And then he takes my foot and he rolls it back to me. And then he sits on the ground with the bottle of stuff that I can put my foot back together and just taunts me while I'm crawling towards him and grabbing my foot and putting it back on.
Right.
I wouldn't have seen that if I would have made it down the trap door because the second time I did it, that didn't happen.
Right.
So those are really fucking cool. Like, that's super cool. But that's what made Resident Evil 4 really neat, was there was a lot of randomness to certain areas. There were a few zones in the game where it's just throw you in and survive while you're fighting hordes of guys, and then some dude with a bag head and chainsaw is sawing down doors, and you're just frantically trying to, like, cover up windows, cover up doors, get to the roof of a building, knock guys off, and then get through. Like, super fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, that is like the best Resident Evil experience that I've ever experienced. One of the better gaming experience that I can remember in the past 20 years. Like, those zones were just so fucking good. It sucks that they didn't explore that again. Maybe they do later. I don't know. I haven't finished the game, but I wish there was more of that survival aspect
Right.
and less of a linear experience that was peppered with possible bad outcomes. That were options.
Are there any games out there that are just universally loved and you're just like, I don't get it? Like,
Not really. I completely understand why all successful games succeed for the most part. I mean, it's a good quality, honestly, to have as a designer. Is it's easy to scoff at things that are popular. Be like Stardew Valley.
what?
Are you trying to bash Stardew Valley? I have played so much that game.
What is this game?
Stardew Valley is Harvest Moon.
Yeah,
Harvest Moon.
But it's like the best Harvest Moon game.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. It's like Stardew Valley, eye roll, right? It's just Harvest Moon. But that's why it's popular.
Sure, yeah.
Like, because it's doing Harvest Moon justice.
Yeah,
You know what I
totally.
mean?
Right,
Yeah.
And like, as a designer, you can't go around scoffing and then saying it sucks.
Right.
You know, it's like, I totally understand why Stardew Valley is great. Totally get it. Like, I totally understand. I'm trying to think. I'm like racking my brain trying to think of any game out there that like had a lot of critical. Okay, Final Fantasy games. Don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get linear story-driven games. I don't understand it. Even Resident Evil is a little tired for me when it comes to the linear aspect of the game. But I know that that's just me. And I know that people like story. And like, I totally get that people like stories and they like to interact with the story.
Yeah.
They like to feel like, even though it's mostly an illusion, then you're not really doing anything. They like feeling like they're at least hitting the play button.
Right.
Like something like
guiding it along.
Firewatch, where it's like you're just kind of like walking through and experiencing a story. Is that?
Well, that's something too. Like, so I didn't play Firewatch, but I played Dear Esther ages ago, which I'm pretty sure is comparable. And Dear Esther was special to me, and it was very moving. It moved me to tears. Like, and I hate to be that person who said something moved them to tears in a game, but genuinely that did.
Yeah.
And it was probably a very personal thing. It's probably, it just struck certain chords with me, resonated with me on a level that made me feel and think about things. And I thought it was great. And I feel like there's room for those type of games.
Right.
But I don't know. There was an art to the storytelling of Dear Esther, where it's kind of like the story is a puzzle in itself. It's not really spelled out for you. And you're kind of experiencing it in a very direct way. But yeah, no, trust me. I was part of this. There's this thing called the Indie Biz List, which is where a bunch of different developers bitch about why they're not on Xbox.
That's great.
But they argued about that. That was like it's like the point of contention is like, is this a game?
Right.
Sure,
Or
sure.
is this, and it's like, I don't know. It seems like art to me, and that's, in the end, that's what it is.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you had a good experience, it's whatever. But
Well, in something like Heavy Rain, like I really like a game like that where it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like a game, but there's just it kind of draws you in with like just the slightest amount of interaction kind of allows you to feel like you're part of this character. So I can kind of get behind that, I guess.
yeah, I again, like those are the type of games where I'd be more willing to go.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But I get it.
You're right,
Like,
right.
It's I can't think of one game out there. I can think of a card game. I shouldn't talk about it though. I don't want to make enemies.
Sure. We talked about Pokemon a little bit already. Like, are you like up to date with the current generations?
Have you played Sun and Moon?
Do you have
yet?
a favorite?
I got Sun and Moon and I didn't play it.
It's very linear. It's
Yeah.
extremely linear.
It's to that point. Okay, so I love Pokemon. Love the
Sure.
idea, the concept, fucking fantastic. That is my bread and fucking butter. I would love to make a Pokemon game in the future.
Right.
Eugenics was a playoff of Pokemon.
Okay,
That's
okay.
what it was about. And yeah.
Do you have a favorite generation?
I like the first generation. That's
Yeah.
the generation I started with.
Uh-huh.
My favorite Pokemon is Coughing.
Okay.
Oh yeah. With coughing with the K. That's so good.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you could probably find a bunch of different characters in my games that look like a lot like Coughing. I love the design. Like the character designs were just fantastic. I like Pokemon Go more than.
Oh really?
Yes.
Really? Yeah.
Yes, I think Pokemon Go. I feel like such a fucking poser. Like Pokemon Go and Overwatch are the like two games, and The Witness, the three games that I've played, and I've been like, wow, this is really fucking cool. In the past 2 years,
Right, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it Pokemon Go, yeah, people at this point love to, like, I'll tweet something about it and people are like, you're so fucking playing Pokemon.
What do you like? What do you like so much about it? I mean, I like it too. I'm just like, I'm curious.
So I don't know. I don't know if it's the fact that like it's first generation, so I'm reliving the original.
Right. It's
Like,
nostalgia factor.
the social aspect is super fucking interesting.
Yeah.
Really, really cool experience. The first month playing.
Oh yeah,
super
It was, I remember
it was
the
incredible.
first week. Like I would go to the park and everyone
was
like
there,
there's
like-
100 people there.
And there's
playing.
people that have never played Pokemon and don't know what it is.
Right.
Like I remember, so me and my wife would head up, and she was pregnant at the time. We'd head up on the wharf and walk the length of the wharf repeatedly, and it was just super hot spot. And get to the end, people would be fishing, and they'd be like, "Oh, these fucking nerds, blah 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 blah." And then you'd like go away from them, and they'd be like, "What's that giant thing? It looks like a pitcher. Like, what is that thing?" And it's like they're fucking playing it.
Right.
They have no fucking clue
Right.
what these things are, and they're scoffing at everybody playing, and they're totally into it. And I don't know. I think it's the excitement of other people getting into it, and there's a lot. I'm in awe of how simplistic that game is, yet how compelling it still is.
Totally.
It's really interesting.
It was just crazy that you could go out at night and it would still be like Bellingham was a college town and it came out during the summer and just like you go out and just like kids just like as if it was like you would think it was Halloween, like kids everywhere. Like it was crazy.
It felt like this social event because I remember I went to a spot where there was like 3 Pokestops, and so everyone was just putting lures on them, and me and my friends saw that there was lures, so we walked over and there was like 30 people who like didn't know each other, and they were just hanging out and talking about Pokemon, and it was
amazing.
so cool. It was just like I don't think I've experienced anything like that since like
I never have. It was I mean, we all got to be part of like this insane social experiment.
Right,
It was like, the wharf. There was a point in time where there were at least 300 people just covering the wharf. Just like, and then somebody
crazy.
would say, Gengar!
Yeah,
and it's like,
they just sprint
and it was like
that's so funny.
having the locator stuff all busted up then, and like
Right.
it almost made it more magical because shit was so rare, and got to go through the the few days that we had website trackers that you could cheat
Right.
with.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's pretty insane. Like, again, I feel like a huge dork, but I'm totally loving it. Like I think all I need is a muck because fucking their Grimers are really rare here. I think I found 3. And a dugong. Because seals are somehow rare in Santa Cruz. I don't know how that's even.
It's too warm. It's too warm. They can't thrive.
And then I think I need a lapras. And maybe 2 babies.
Okay.
And I've actually got them all.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Wow.
And I've played the shit out of like every Pokemon except for the latest one.
Right.
And I've never been a person to try to catch them all.
Never been about
It's never been a
that was me. It was all about catching them all with
I'm
me.
40 away from a living dex, or like 40 or 50.
No, really?
I'm so
That's
close.
crazy.
Oh, man.
See, that was never a thing to me. And then it's like, this game streamlined it for me though, because that's what it's about. It's just about catching them all. And like,
Yeah. And that's like the purest Pokemon can get. I don't know. It is pretty cool.
I was 18, I think, when Pokemon started booming and the cartoon came out.
Okay.
And the Game Boy, I think the first week of the Game Boy hitting the States, the Game Boy version, I think I had blue and my cousin had red. But I went over to his house. I think it was during the summer, and he's like, "You ever heard of this game called Pokemon?" Or no, the show called Pokemon. And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, my little brother watches it, and it's like all these thousands of weird creatures, and they all just say their name." And I was like, "What? Really?" And he's like, "Oh, it's totally insane."
That's such a great way to describe the show.
And it was so comparable
They all just
to
say their name.
this thing in the 80s called Muscle Men. And it was all abbreviated. It was another really like gotta catch 'em all situation. And we were really into that back then. And just the collection aspect was really cool. And he's like, "Hey, you want to go? It's a game. You want to get it?"
Right.
And like, yeah, okay.
Of course.
So we both bought it and then literally stayed up for the next 2 days playing it.
Oh, wow.
And had no idea about the game, about evolutions, about anything.
Yeah.
It was completely blind, and it was one of the greatest gaming experiences.
I agree. Well, that's what I love. Like, that game feels very like kind of Metroidvania almost, like just in the way that it's the least linear in the entire series.
Like,
And it's just
there's so many like I remember that when we finally did go to sleep, my cousin didn't go to sleep. I went to sleep. Right before we went to sleep, we found that patch of Abras right in the beginning of the game. And he's like, they keep teleporting away. I don't know what to do. Right. It's like, I was like, oh, well, whatever. So I go to sleep. I wake up and he goes, "I fucking caught one." Right. And it turned into a Kadabra, And and it's like, what? And it's like, and that's all he did. All he did was find out a way. I think he used a Paris to put it to sleep to then catch it, and then leveled it up while I was sleeping. And it was just like, whoa.
yeah, and that kind of stuff that was like unprecedented in gaming.
Are there any like shows you're watching now? Do you watch TV?
Oh, yeah. I watch a lot
that are big influences.
of movies.
Yeah. Any movies that were big influences?
Shitloads.
Sure.
Yeah, movies and music are way more influential on me than games when it comes to art in general.
Right.
I'm into really weird stuff, as you probably would assume.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, growing up, like Trauma movies and Tim Burton movies, just horror movies in general. And like, again, growing up in the 80s, video rental stores were really huge, and there was always the horror section.
Yeah.
I saw that Beetlejuice cut out.
Yeah,
That's great.
And it had just, the horror section of any rental store for a kid like me was just the most inspiring thing in the world, because you've got all these sensationalized cover boxes that look fucking cool. And then you got the back, which has, maybe 3 or 4 of the goriest shots of the movie.
Right, yeah.
And then as a kid, you get to like try to figure out what this movie is about.
Yeah.
Like by putting those things together. I love that so much. That was a huge part of my childhood growing up. And I got away with renting a lot of movies I wasn't supposed to see.
What about music? What are some of the some music?
I listen to a lot of different music, mostly just rock music, progressive, weird music. But yeah, it's hard to say. There's just such a range.
Yeah.
But yeah, growing up in the 90s as a teenager, there was a lot of good music then.
Right.
And very accessible, I guess, good music. Now it's much harder. You have to really work to find something good, new, and inspiring.
Like, well, what would like a teenage Edmund, if Edmund had to go see a concert of anyone, like who would he go see?
Well, I did probably Nirvana for sure.
Oh yeah.
Which came through town. My dad was a bouncer at the Catalyst.
Oh, cool.
And I almost saw Nirvana, but I wasn't old enough to go.
Oh no!
That's so sad.
He used to give me autographs.
Saddest part of this
like,
podcast.
I have like Eddie Vedder's autograph and a bunch of other people, like
cool.
the Dinosaur Jr. and
That's
a
awesome.
bunch of like good bands. He would always just give me shirts with signatures on them. I was like, fucking cool. I need music to survive. Like I need music to work. Like
Right.
the most inspiring thing for me is to just I go up to my office and put on an album that feels right, and I play it as loud as possible, and I just work.
yeah.
And you'd be surprised how much random songs, lyrics, and just feelings in songs will inspire whole games.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's just so much you can do with music that is hard to execute in the same way in other mediums.
Yeah. It just like can convey like, just like a feeling, like this.
It's visceral.
Punches you.
It's visceral, and it happens like it sucks as an artist who makes these long-winded, experiences that are interactive. I can never go on stage and scream a lyric,
Right. Yeah.
and have and move somebody in the same way.
Yeah.
That, like I have to fucking
Yeah.
type out a random bit of dialogue, an expressive character, and 510 items.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. The music in Isaac, which is like this like wonderfully like creepy music. Was that like specifically inspired by anything or?
When Matthias remade the music for Rebirth, or even when Danny did too, I always send the musicians that I work with a bunch of reference points. And for Isaac, it was a lot of Danny Elfman.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was like Danny Elfman meets Pagany. So Matthias had a band name called Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum.
Okay.
And they're like, it's hard to describe, but it's kind of like hippie, pagan, post-apocalyptic,
Right.
metal.
Yeah.
And there was a darkness there that I thought was super appropriate. And I wanted him to reference that as well as, the whimsical darkness of Danny Elfman.
Right.
Some
Yeah.
of the Tim Burton-y stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, kind of have a more thick, atmosphere, I guess.
Sure. Sure.
I definitely wanted to push the atmosphere in the remake because the graphics and everything looked more lush and atmospheric.
Yeah.
And I felt like the music needed to feel more atmospheric.
So this was just something I thought of, and it's just kind of like a question I'm curious about. Who did the trailer for Rebirth? Like that just jarring, like, I don't know.
Which one?
I'm trying to... I just remember there's this one I saw that like felt like a subliminal message was being...
The one with naked people? Or?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
One with naked.
James did that one as well as the original, which was a playoff of the Legend of Zelda one. But I literally told James to just go fucking nuts. I mean, trailer for Isaac, it's kind of like I'm not going to put a traditional trailer out there and convince anybody who doesn't know what Isaac is to buy the game.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I might as well make something insane that kind of like sums up the insanity of what the game has to offer for people that don't know what it is.
Right.
Absolutely.
I'd rather have a really interesting, artistically weird video out there than something, cool or traditional.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I gave him a few bucks and he got people to get naked.
Right. That's so great.
I have the bag. I have one of the bag heads. He sent me. Oh, it's over there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Super cool. I mean, James is the guy I'm working with for Bumbo. Like
Okay, yeah.
He's
Great.
programming and doing all the 3D stuff, and he's great to work with. And I worked with him on another secret project, which hopefully we can get back into, maybe next year. But yeah.
And you did Fingered with him, right?
I did Fingered with him. I did. Yeah, that was very fun. That was very old school for me to do that. That really quick,
Yeah.
fun, inspired, weird experience.
Totally.
I don't know what people really thought, but I mean, it was basically free. So
As much as I would love to talk about Pokemon and music forever, we should probably get to the takeaway.
Yeah, sure. So the takeaway, which is just like one blurb, like if someone just fast forwarded, what's the thing you want them to be left with?
I know, which
That's how it's like, maybe I can describe it.
Yeah, I
don't
know. Like, that's like everyone's reaction. They're like,
They're just like, all right, don't release this episode. I don't.
What is the takeaway? Fuck. The hardships that you face in life paint a picture of who you are, and you can really utilize those things to make something positive and impactful. And basically, I'm not the kind of person that cries over spilt milk, and I've had a difficult time growing up, and I know a lot of people have, but I never look back and feel regret, and I never look back and feel bad for myself or sorry for myself. I always try to do what I can to move forward. And sometimes those really bad things that happen to you in life just flesh you out into this very more whole person. Yeah, I could say without those things in my life, I probably wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am today. And you got to kind of like wear those like a badge and I guess be inspired by, find the beauty in some of the ugliest things.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
I love it.
Cool.
Yeah. It was so well said.
Yeah, that was great.
Let's get into plugs.
Yeah, plugs.
I mean, we plugged the crap out of your games already, but
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter,
we'll
I guess.
cut out the secret project thing if the secret project thing isn't has not been released by. Or,
Yeah. Yeah, it probably won't be. I'll show it to you guys though. But
Cool.
Yeah, plugs. Yeah, Bumbo.
All right.
Bumbo's coming out by the end of the year. It'll be cool.
Great.
Sweet.
And then hopefully have something out by mid this year that will be neat.
Sweet. All right.
Cool.
I've got some plugs.
You got some plugs? All right.
You can follow me at K_Hoog
Yeah.
on Twitter.
Oh, yeah, we can plug your Twitter, yeah.
Or then it's not out currently, but hopefully by the time this comes out, me and my buddy are working on a Let's Play channel, and we're trying to beat a bunch of games that shouldn't be beaten with two people, including Binding of Isaac. So gonna do the whole thing co-op, or try to. And yeah.
Do you want to plug your Twitter handle?
Oh, it's just my name. Just
Yeah.
Edmund McMillen.
All right. And I'm at John Lee 271. That's all I've got. Yeah.
Cool.
All right, Edmund, thank you so much for
thank
being
you
on our
so
podcast.
much.
You were a
problem.
great guest. All right, Kev. You good?
Yeah.
All right, hit that button.
Thanks for listening to The Process. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, be sure to give us a like over at facebook.com/The Process with John and Kevin, or subscribe over at soundcloud.com/The Process with John and Kevin, or follow us. There's so many things.
So many things.
Follow us over at Process Podcast on Twitter. You can also find us on basically any podcasting app. You can find us on iTunes. I don't know.
Next week, we continue our San Jose
Romp?
trip. Romp? Trip.
Romp.
Trump. We continue our San Jose streak with musician Devin Macias. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Macias.
Devin
Macias.
Macias.
He's a
And
musician, San Jose.
Yeah, he's from, he plays in Slime Girls. He has a current project called Junior Adelberg, and they released, after we recorded him, but before this episode is coming out, he put out a new record, and it's really dope.
Check it out.
And we're going to play some tracks from, anyways, check it out next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.